Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to Interviewing Wednesday. We're very glad you're with us today. It is January 17th, January 18th, 2023. Oh, sorry about that. Let's see here. We'll make that an 18. There we go. Now we got the correct date on there. All right. For those people on Zoom, if you have any questions throughout the presentation, please just enter them into the chat window. For those watching on Facebook, thank you for joining us. Please just enter any questions you have into the comment field. We're monitoring both feeds. We'll be sure to get your questions answered for you later in the session. Also, for those on Zoom, if you'd like to network with everybody else who's on the call, please put in your contact information. Tell us who you are, what you do, target companies you're looking for, put in your LinkedIn profile. This is a great opportunity to connect with other people and expand your LinkedIn connections. Please note this event has been recorded and is currently live on Facebook. The recording will be on the Career DFW Facebook page and the Career USA YouTube channel for others to view in the future. By participating in this event, you give consent for your name and picture to appear, but please note any comments you put in the Zoom chat window will not appear in the recording. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Jeff Morse. Back in 2008, I started a website called careerdfw.org, a website to help those who are unemployed in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. In 2012, I expanded to help those around the United States with careerusa.org. I have written a book called What I've Learned About Your Job Search You May Not Know. It is available on Amazon, or if you see me in person, I always have copies with me. Since 2007, I've been facilitating and leading the North Dallas Plano Career Focus Group. We have an interesting meeting coming up this Friday, and I'll tell you all about it at the end of this session. And since 2017, I've been a member of the practice interview team. Remember, LinkedIn and your resume isn't going to get you a job. It will get you a phone call. How well you practice your interviewing skills, that's what's going to get you your next job. And you'll hear more about the Dallas Pit Crew in just a moment. Well, we're doing our special guest interview speaker series right now. Last week, we had Paul Walsh talking about behavioral interviewing. This week, Gayle Bridgeman will be with us to talk about interviewing. And the upcoming weeks, Mark McDonald, Walt Glass, Tony Bashir, and Jack Bick will all be here to present on interviewing and different forms of interviews. Just want to mention quickly, Walt's not with us today, but Walt runs an interview success workshop. This is a great way to practice your interviewing skills before you go in for an interview. So maybe before we do the pit crew, you want to reach out to Walt and see if you can get one of his workshops. It's on Tuesday mornings. It's totally free. He's here to help you build skills and confidence so you have successful interviewing. You can click on that if you want to capture that QR code that will start an email to Walt saying that you're interested. Just add your own information, or you can reach out to Walt Glass on Walt_Glass at yahoo.com, or look him up on LinkedIn. And if you open his About section, it will all be about his LinkedIn, about his workshop that he conducts. So you can reach out to him there. All right, good afternoon, Ron. Tell us about the practice interview team. Oh, you're muted. You're muted.
Okay, let me try that again.
There we go.
Good afternoon, everyone. The practice interview team is just that. It is a group of coaches or panelists which volunteer their time to help you become confident in the interviewing process. We will help you with mock interviews, either one-on-one or a panel kind of interview. All of our panelists have been hiring managers in the past or even currently, so they do have real-world experience. As Walt said, we did increase our price this year 10% from nothing to nothing plus 10%. So it's always free, and we one of our sayings is practice early and practice often. Don't wait for the day before your interview to give us a call. It's very unlikely that we're going to be able to fit you in. We'll need at least 3 or 4 business days typically, and we need a resume and a job description, and thirdly, the time slots that you have open for this. Okay, our goal is to make you more confident during the interview process. It typically takes about an hour and a half. There's an email up there, dallaspitcrew@gmail.com. That's where you send your request, and there's a phone number associated with that. I did paste in the chat window a link to all of our files that gives you a lot of good information about interviewing, such as what is a star story or how to get to these videos that we're currently watching. I do need to make sure that everybody is on notice. The pit crew will shut down because leaders will be on vacation starting tomorrow through January 30th, or the week of January 30th is when we'll kind of pick it back up. Okay. You still can send a request to that email. One of the coaches may pick it up, but the leadership and kind of coordination is going to be out during that period. So you can pretty much expect we won't really kind of be picking them back up till the week of the 30th. As always, we're looking for volunteers. If you have interviewing experience and want to help and be a panelist, please let me know by sending to that email. Thank you all very much. I appreciate your attendance. We hope we can offer some value to you. Thank you, Jeff.
Ron, thank you very, very much. Walt is having to reboot his computer, so I'll have Walt give his little talk here at the end of this presentation. Let's see here. All right, so today our special guest speaker is Gayle Bridgeman. Gayle works for Lee Heck Harrison. She's sort of on their emergency team where she'll go into a company that's about to lay off a whole bunch of people and help them with their training and help getting them sort of offloaded on, getting them out. She works for Lee Heck Harrison, as I mentioned. This is a recorded presentation. She gave this to us a while back. And so I'm going to play it. It's about 45 minutes long. And then once it's over, we will answer. Ron, Walt, I will all be here to answer any questions you have about it. So give me just a second and we will get it started for you.
Thank you for the opportunity to be here. So, well, I don't have anything that's fun and visual on this slide deck. Usually we do this in person when we're working with several hundred people that join us at a big forum. But I have incorporated some new things today too that I want to share with you. I would like you to hold questions until the end. Okay, so as we get started, one thing I do the interviewing as a topic. That's one of the worst things I hate thinking about doing myself is interviewing. It's just, I'm like, oh, I panic when I start thinking about having to do an interview for myself, but I love coaching my clients to tell them what they need to do. I also am a branding specialist, and what that means is I help people how they brand themselves on digital media as well as in person. That's an important piece as well. And then also LinkedIn is my specialty, where I help people build their business profiles to communicate what they do and how they want people to perceive them too. So I do a lot of different things. The last couple of years, I've worked almost exclusively with career development with companies who are helping their associates learn how to develop for their jobs and grow in their roles. I used to do a lot of career transition work with LHH as well. So helping people that have been laid off. And that was how I met Jeff Morris and Foster Williams back in 2008. So been quite a journey. It still is a journey. So I'm going to talk today about acing that interview. Again, forgive me for my voice today because my allergies came back full force a couple days ago, and I'm a couple of octaves lower than normal, but I hope you'll be able to understand the tips I'm sharing. These are going to be tips today of what to do and not to do in the interview process. And just a lot of tips to help you remember to focus. And, Mark and Walt have both mentioned some things about what you need to do to prepare. It's very important that you give plenty of time and consideration to the interview as well as your resume. So today's focus, I'm going to talk about interviewing in general, and hopefully someday we'll be back to interviewing in person like we used to. Also, I have a segment I've added. This is some new information about interviewing in the virtual world. Not everybody's comfortable being on camera and talking to people without people being in front of them. I feel like I'm looking out my window and seeing the trees and stuff in my front yard and the bird fountain in front of my office and in my window. And I'm like, oh gosh, where are all the people? But I know you're there. And then we'll answer questions at the very end. So as we get started here, interviewing in general. I break this up into several different buckets. I like doing things this way. We have three different buckets here. We have how you prepare for the interview, and then the event itself, where you either go in person or you're having the conversation with the people that are interviewing you, and then the follow up, which is after you've completed that activity. So, as we get started, we're going to talk about preparing for the interview. We have three components here. One is your mental component, one is your physical component, and the last is your virtual component. And I'll explain each one of these a little bit more. As you think about the mental component of preparing for the interview, I put into this bucket, it's like researching the company and the position that you're going after. I can't tell you how important this piece is. I have interviewed a number of people in my career with different kinds of companies as both a hiring manager and as a director of HR. I can't tell you how many times people would say, "Oh, what does your company do?" I'm like, oh, why don't you go on the internet and find out? Back when I first started in my career, we didn't have the internet. Can you believe that? I'm not really that old, but we didn't have, it's not the internet's not been around that long. And we used to have to write to companies and ask them to mail like their annual, their financial book and everything, like their company's financial results. And so we would write and get information to be able to learn about a company as we wanted to interview. Now it's very simple. You can go online and you can get information about a company and the position too. So that is so important because you don't want to go into an interview and say, oh, I don't know what you do. Okay, then maybe you're not the right person for the job. First of all, that's very important. Second of all, assess your skills. I always tell my clients to look at the position itself that they're interviewing for or planning to interview for, and then look at what the people are wanting, and then look at your own skills and say, how do you align? Because if I have 5 things I'm looking for in a person and you show up to interview with me and you don't talk about any of those 5 things as being your skill set, then I'm wondering if you're not the right fit for the job. So that's real important too, that you say, what do I do? Maybe you've got 30 great skills, but in the job posting, there may be 5 that they're focused on. So think about that and how do you align with what they're looking for? Because it's all about what they're looking for, not about what you want. You're trying to match yourself to what they're looking for. Then compile answers to questions. There are going to be a lot of questions you have about the company itself. They're going to be asking you a lot of questions too. It is really, really important, like both Walt and Mark said, you must do your homework up front. You must prepare, like over prepare for the things that you want to tell about your stories and your experience. Because when you go in, everything will be top of mind and you don't have to think back to 3 years ago or 5 years ago or 10 years ago to an experience that you need to share. And then the types of interviews. What types of interviews are there? Oh my goodness, there are so many. And it used to be that recruiters would do phone interviews first just to assess that connection. And then you might go in person. You might have a one-on-one with the HR or the hiring manager. You might have a panel interview. There are many different types of processes you can go through. But this year, especially, it seems like a phone interview is not enough now. They start with a Zoom interview or any other platform that you might use, MS Teams, WebEx. What else is there? There are a lot of other ones out there. Zoom is the one I use the most, and that seems to be a most popular one. But there are a lot of types of interviews you have to be ready to jump in and do. So you need to prepare mentally for that as well, especially if you don't like doing interviews over a computer and a screen. You've got to really start feeling comfortable with doing that because that's your first impression if you can't meet them in person. Okay, preparing now for the physical part. There are 3 components here. I start with attitude, and you notice my tip at the bottom says attitude is everything. It absolutely is. We've all been through unfair situations. We've felt like, oh my gosh, I didn't deserve to lose my job. I didn't ask for this to happen. But when you think about it, when you go and talk to someone, whether it's on camera or in person, and you're trying to be considered for a role, your attitude is so important because, don't go feeling sorry for yourself. Don't go being bitter. It's like you say, hey, I'm here and I can do this. I can do this job. And you want that right attitude because leave everything else behind. And I know I've been in those shoes before where I've been in transition and it gets hard. You feel like you've been beat down to the curb sometimes. But please keep that in mind. Just remember, attitude is everything. Now, your appearance is important too, though. And you think about that if you're going in person, you need to dress the part. And when I say dress the part, think about the job that you are interviewing for. What is the role? Is it going to be an entry level role? Is it a mid level management role? Is it a senior level role? What is your brand and what are you aspiring to? You want to think about how you look and how you want to dress. I used to always tell my guy clients, wear a suit and tie, wear a suit and tie. That was back in 2009 and 10, back in that era. I don't tell people to necessarily dress like that now, but you have to know the company that you're going to. A real key part on that is ask your recruiter, how should I dress? Ask that recruiter because they can say, and they do often anymore, don't wear a suit and tie, guys, you'll be overdressed. Or telling the ladies, don't wear high heels and be all sleek and fancy that way. It's like you're going to be overdressed for our business. So you don't want to look like you're out of place the moment you walk in the door or appear on the screen. So make sure that you pay attention to your appearance. The other thing is thinking about your appearance, making sure that everything is taken care of. Sometimes, we have stray hairs. Sometimes we maybe needed to have our hair colored or cut, things like that. And so it's like, I'm not telling you you have to do those things, but look at yourself in the mirror. And I always tell people, do this a couple of days before your interview. Dress up how you're going to dress, whether it's in person or virtual, and then look at yourself and ask the question, would I hire me? That's a real important question. Would I hire me? And then if you say, I'm not sure, what is there about looking at yourself that you wouldn't hire? So think about those things. It's real important how you present yourself, just your overall appearance too. I know Locke Alderson, he also does a lot of interviewing topics and we always laugh. It's like, okay, you've got to have that breath spray. Well, when you're meeting virtually, that's not as important, but when you're meeting in person, that can be. And if people smoke, they need to be aware of that because you're going to smell like smoke when you go into an interview. So there are just a lot of details like that you need to pay attention to. And then last but not least is your attire. And what I want to encourage you to think about is, how do you want to look and what colors are flattering and how does this tie into the business itself where you want to have a role? Are you going to look like you fit the role that you're interviewing for? So that is real important too, to think about your attire. And your attire is still important when you are doing virtual interviewing as well. Okay. Now let's go to the next one. This is still part of your preparing. This is the virtual impression. This is your first impression. And it used to be, I would always tell people that your first impression before you meet in person is going to be your LinkedIn profile. What's your picture look like on LinkedIn? What are you saying about yourself? What do people see in your headline? What do they see in your summary section? So what are they reading about you? What's the impression there when they look at your profile? Well, these days, that may still be your first impression, what's on social media. But when you go to interview, if it's not in person, it's still going to be virtual. And so you really need to make sure that you're making that right first impression. That includes how you talk, how you dress. How does that align with your LinkedIn profile? Okay. So think about social media. What is your brand? How many different social media platforms are each of you on? I know that that's an issue a lot of times where people are on a lot of platforms and you may make different impressions depending on what those platforms are. I want to encourage you, especially in job search, make sure that you pay special attention not only to LinkedIn, but any other social platforms you are on. Make sure that you're not saying things that would keep you from getting hired. Sometimes even pictures on your Facebook or other accounts like that. You might have pictures on there that you're sharing with friends and not think anything about it, but a potential employer and recruiters could look you up. And I've actually done that before. I've worked on projects with some recruiters in the last few years where I actually looked up people on Facebook that they were supposed to interview. And there were a few that we actually declined to interview because we saw the things they were posting on Facebook between photos and comments. And we said, wait a minute, that looks like a different person, but it was the same person on LinkedIn that was applying for the job. So you want to make sure that you're not doing extra damage to your brand by things on other platforms. Sometimes I tell people, depending on where you're at, you may want to close down those profiles or you want to really censor them. When I say censor them, make sure that you're not making public posts and you're keeping things amongst friends. And even that can be a little bit scary. So just really pay attention. LinkedIn is public and anybody can see what you have on LinkedIn. So keep that in mind whenever you're commenting or the kinds of things you share, because that is all about forming your brand. So, okay, now we're going to move over to the event itself. And the event itself has 3 categories. Your first impression, and this is assuming in-person interviewing. The second is answering questions, and the third is asking questions. So we're going to start first with that first impression, the actual event itself. This is assuming in person. You want to arrive promptly. Don't be late. Please don't be late. And if you find you're going to be late, you need to call the person, have their phone number. That's real important that you have that mobile phone number of the person you're meeting, whether it's the HR recruiter or it's the hiring manager. Make sure you've got a number you can call in case you get caught up in a traffic jam on the freeway and can't get there. But it's real important. Be there 15 minutes ahead of time is great. You don't need to be there any sooner than that, but just try to make sure that you know how to get where you're going and be there timely. Smile. You know, sometimes when we go into interviews, we're very nervous, aren't we? And it's like, oh my gosh, I'm just so nervous. Don't forget that smile, because especially if smiling is a part of your brand, smile, okay? A firm handshake. Now, I realize 2020 has been the year of nixing the handshakes, but if we get back to shaking hands again, and that will happen someday, you don't want the limp fish handshake. You want to shake a person's hand firmly, but not too firmly. You don't want to break their hand either. Make eye contact. I can't tell you how many times I've met applicants and it's like they look at me and then they look away. And when we're sitting down and talking, they won't look, they won't make direct eye contact. Sometimes it may be a cultural thing, but it's like you really have to force yourself if you're not used to that. Think about looking at that person that you're talking to. Most people are not scary. So think about making that eye contact. That's real important. It makes me feel like you're connecting. And when I ask questions, it's like, if you're not looking at me, I question, do you have something to hide? So make sure that you're paying attention to that. Your body language is really important too. You don't want to sit cross-armed in a chair. You don't want to sit like where you're kind of lazing back in the chair and acting like you're in a lounge chair watching TV either. Body language is important both in person and when you're on video as well, because they can tell if you're slouching around, or they can tell if you're like, oh, God, is this ever going to end? So, just the things that you do, you can pay attention to those things and just be aware of what you're doing. Okay. Now we're going to get into answering questions. There are some real important questions, and I know Mark and Walt deal in this area specifically about the types of questions that you will be asked in the interview process. The first and foremost, most important one I always ask, and I always seem to get asked that too when I'm on the interviewing side, is tell me a little bit about yourself. That does not mean that I want to know that you have a spouse and children and grandchildren and a frog or a dog or a cat. I don't care about those things. The first question when I say, tell me about yourself, what do you do professionally? What is the position you're interviewing for here? I want you to frame your answer around why you're the right person for that job before we even get started. So you want to talk about, well, here are the things I enjoy doing. Here's some things I've really done well in my career. And I'm thinking, oh gosh, that aligns very nicely with what we're interviewing about today. Maybe this person's a good fit because they do the things that we're looking for. So it's kind of an informative, what are you? What is your brand? What do you do? There are two different kinds of questions in the series of questions. One is traditional questions, and these questions are going to be things like, have you ever managed a project? Have you ever managed a budget of over $100 million? Have you ever managed people? I mean, each one of those questions that you can be asked, it's going to be a straightforward answer. Well, yes, I have, or no, I haven't, or yes, this is what I've done. The behavioral interview questions, this is story time. And when Walt and Mark both said that you need to work on developing your preparation for the interview, this is very, very important. The behavioral questions, it's a storytelling exercise. At LHH, we use what we call the SOAR stories, SOAR. Some people call it STAR. So they're different abbreviations. But if you use any one of these, think about this. There are 4 steps to your answer to the question. Tell me about a time you missed a project deadline. Okay, that's a question that someone's asking me in a behavioral interview. So I've got my source story, and I'm going to tell in 60 to 90 seconds what my answer is to that question. So the SOAR, S stands for describe your situation. Not too much, not too little. The O talks about obstacles that you might have encountered. The A talks about what were the actions you took. And then the R is the results that you achieved. And the R, the results, I always like to say, let's put a happy face by that R, because we ideally, even if it was a challenging circumstance, you want to say, but I turned things around, here were the results, and everyone was happy. So if you remember those 4 steps for building your stories in the behavioral interview process, you're going to be able to hit a home run every time. But remember, you've got to prepare, and there are behavioral questions that you might be asked. I'm sure that Mark and Walt both have a list of questions that you might be asked that you need to prepare for. They're quite extensive numbers of questions that you can prepare for. But if you look and look at those questions, and then you also go through and write your own story, how do you answer each of those questions? Sometimes those stories, I've got examples that might fit 2 or 3 different behavioral questions because it just fits. So I don't have to necessarily have a different story for everyone. Hopefully, I won't use the same story in the same interview twice, but you don't want to do hypothetical. It's like, tell me about a time that you had a challenge with a manager. And I say, well, I never have had, but if I did, here's what I would do. If you do that once, that might be okay. If you answer hypothetically instead of a real world situation twice or 3 times, you're probably not the right person for the job. One of the things that I've used in behavioral interviews is I used to have a guy who was a director of operations on our team, and he was kind of a pain. And I knew that he was difficult. And I had to ask people questions as the HR director before they met with this guy, because I knew that some of these people, when they came in, I thought, oh, I don't know if they're going to be able to stand this guy and work well with him. So I would ask certain questions about, tell me about a time you've had a challenge with a manager that was very difficult. And I would see what their responses were. And some of them handled themselves very well with that. And some of those were successful because they got along with this guy, they could work well together. There were others that, by the way they answered that question, I realized they weren't going to be a good fit with this guy that they were going to report to. So oftentimes when you're asked behavioral questions, it's because they know you're going to have certain circumstances, and they want to see if they think you can deal with that and be the right fit for that job. So keep those things in mind as well. Okay, now we're going again to another series in the event. This is about the salary. First you need to know what the job is and what they're expecting of you before you talk about the money. Sometimes recruiters want you to talk about how much money do you want right up front. You need to do your research. You need to have an answer You need to know what's competitive in your field. So you can't avoid talking about salary. You can always defer that a bit by saying, well, I'd like to know more about the job role itself before we discuss salary. So do your homework. That's really, really important. Okay. Excuse my stopped up head. Asking questions. Think about this. When you ask questions in an interview, it's not just about them asking you questions, but it's also about you looking and saying, what else can I learn here? Assess the fit of the job. That is so important because I've actually personally had interviews before. I had one in particular that I met the person I would report to, and it just didn't feel like a good fit. We just couldn't connect. I thought, well, this is the first time I've met her. Maybe that's why. And so I met the rest of the team. We hit it off very well. I felt like that would be a good fit working with the team. When I came back and had another interview with the hiring manager, the one that I would be reporting to, it was like there was not a fit. It was like a big gap, big gap. And I realized after that interview, that second time around with her, I thought, I could get along great with these other people on the team. I felt like there was a solid fit, but I didn't feel that connection with her. And it was just like that feeling, just a gut feel. And so finally, what I did, and the tricky thing about this was a friend of mine, a very good friend I had worked with for years, had recommended me for this job because the hiring manager was a personal friend of hers. That was kind of like, oh, how do I get out of this gracefully, right? Because I didn't want to be offered the job and turn it down. I didn't want to take the job feeling like it wasn't a good fit. So I actually wrote to the hiring manager and I gracefully declined being a candidate for that interview because I just felt like that wasn't going to be a win-win situation. So, sometimes you have to assess and say, maybe this is good, maybe it's not good. But, trust your judgment as you're looking at this because it's real important, you know, what you're going to be doing and who you're going to be doing it with. The other thing, one of the questions I always like to ask is, why is this role available? Where's the person that had it before? Sometimes you'll get an answer that says, oh, that person got promoted. Yay, that's good, right? Sometimes they'll say, well, that person left the company. Ooh, okay, why? And sometimes they won't divulge that. Sometimes they'll say, well, this position's been open 5 times in the last 5 years. I'm going, ooh, okay, maybe that's a one to stay away from because they're churning people. So don't be afraid to ask that question. Why is this role available? I always like the one where the person that was in it got promoted because that shows growth. It shows growth from within and so on. So, but it does show interest when you ask questions versus just sitting there like a bump on a log and just answering their questions, right? Okay, let's go on to the next one, the follow-up. After you've completed your interview, you can write thank you notes, you can make calls or send emails, and be gracious in the end. I'm going to talk about each one of these specifically. As we talk about thank you notes, I used to be really big on writing a thank you note in person, like a mail. Send it through snail mail or the postal service if you don't know what snail mail is. But it's like writing a card, just a couple of lines and a little card. Thank you so much for taking time to meet with me about the project manager role. I really enjoyed learning about the company and I look forward to hearing from you. I'm very interested in this role. You could say something like that. It doesn't have to be long and grandiose. It shows appreciation to the person you met with or people, multiple people. It helps you to stand out. Oftentimes, I've seen this myself and I've heard this from other recruiters that out of 10 people that get interviewed for a job, one writes a thank you note, 9 don't. That does make a big difference. So it makes you stand out. And that could be a deciding factor, the fact that you followed up. Now, if you have something that you thought of after the interview, that's an opportunity to add some additional input as well. My tip today is because so many companies are operating virtually. I mean, like if you wrote me a note and mailed it in the snail mail and sent it to the Lehigh Harrison office, I would never get it because I don't go to that office. I work from my home office or I go to different campuses and work with people there. So in today's environment, especially, I doubt that people you interview with are going to give you their home address. They're thinking, I don't want you to know where I live. Okay, why do you want my home address? Because you want to send a gift or a card or whatever. So think about that. Email is the best approach to send something to people. Okay, so make sure that you're paying attention to those follow-ups. You can do calls and emails too to follow up. My personal preference is I don't like people making calls. That seems very intrusive to me. If you've interviewed, you're certainly welcome to ask them how long they're going to take to make a decision. How many more people do they plan to interview before they make a decision on the role? You can have those kind of conversations during the closing of your interview. If you ask them, gosh, is it okay if I reach out to you a week from now and just check in? That interviewer says, sure, put it on your calendar and do it. Most people don't follow up, when given that permission to do it. I like the option of the email versus a call, just because you're sending an email to follow up and you're not intruding in their day. And it just shows that you're interested. So please keep that in mind. I think that's always a good touch to do. And then last but not least, think about a gracious conclusion. What happens if you receive an offer and accept it? That's great. You're thankful, you're appreciative, you're excited about the role. What happens if you don't get that job? Let's say you went through several interviews and you ended up not being their choice. I want you to remember something here, that even if you did not get that job, write them a thank you note anyway. And that's like an email. We're talking emails now. But whoever you interviewed with, if you really like that company and you really want to be a part of that company and you really feel like there's another opportunity down the road, this is not the end of the road, write them a note and just say, thank you so much for meeting with me and considering me for this role. Please keep me in mind if you have future opportunities. If you feel that way, you may not feel that way. You may say, yeah, I didn't want to work there anyway. But by writing a note like that, I actually had a client who he had a group of target companies. There were 4 companies in Plano that he wanted to be with. Those were his top 4. He only wanted to consider one of those 4 companies. So he actually interviewed. There was a position with one of his target companies, and he interviewed. The recruiters contacted him to put him through the screening. He interviewed with the hiring managers, and he didn't get the job. So he wrote a thank you note to all the people involved, different emails for each one, thanking them for taking their time. Please keep me in mind for future opportunities. Okay. A month later, the recruiters called him again and said, oh my gosh, we have another opportunity. Are you interested? Of course he was. So he went through a different set of hiring managers this time, same recruiters. He went through that process, didn't get the job this time. Now, by the second time, you start thinking, oh, maybe this is just not going to work out for this company. But he did the same thing again. He wrote a thank you note to everyone involved, thank you email. And those recruiters, oh my gosh, they were so impressed that he didn't come back and say, well, you guys screwed up. You had made it so I didn't get the job. You didn't present me right, whatever. Sometimes people blame recruiters. So about a month later, seriously, a month later, here comes another opportunity. And the recruiters called my client and they said, okay, we have another opportunity. It's a better opportunity. It's a manager role. It's a higher level role. It was in the IT arena. That was where he was looking before. And they said, are you interested? And of course he still was. So they went through the process. He interviewed with a bunch of hiring managers and people on the team, different set of people than the first 2 sets. Guess what? He got the job. He got the job. And he wrote back again, thank you notes to everybody. Thank you so much. I'm so excited about the opportunity. You know what happened in the end? The recruiters came back and told my client, they said, you know what? Because you were so gracious in defeat, you didn't come back and chew us out. You were gracious, but you said, keep me in mind if you have future opportunities. And you know what was so cool about that? Those recruiters, after the first go around, they were so impressed with him that they said, this is the kind of person we want on our team. This is the kind of person we need to be, having as a team member is what they called him. So they kept working on his behalf. He didn't know that, but they were working behind the scenes on his behalf, trying to get him in because they wanted him at that company. So he ended up spending about 9 years at that company and then moved away to a different, better opportunity. But it was such a cool story. And I love that because the recruiter said, you didn't give up and you were gracious in defeat. So just remember that, because recruiters, they'll remember those things about you as well. And that could do you better, resolve in the long run. So recruiters have memories like elephants, and remember that, because they forget. If you've treated them nasty, they'll remember that. Okay. So let's jump over now to interviewing in the virtual world. Okay, the same kind of prep we just went through. You're going to do the same kind of preparation, but it's going to be some additional details that I want you to look at as you move into interviewing virtually. So, 4 key areas that I want to point out for virtual interviewing. And this has been big in 2020 because most people get to interview on Zoom. I hear it time and again, even from clients I'm working with in career development. They are asked to interview for roles that they might be interviewing with managers in other cities for the corporation, and they're having to interview for internal promotions via Teams or Zoom or WebEx or whatever. Okay. So 4 topical areas you need to practice, over practice getting ready for an interview if it's going to be virtual. How do you operate the video platform? That's a big one because there are different platforms. And if you're not comfortable, you need to get comfortable. And that means practice before the day of the interview. What do you look like on the screen? So there's some tips I'm going to offer for that to help make yourself come across better and a little bit more flattering. It still feels awkward to a lot of folks. It still feels awkward to me, but you have to get used to that. And then prepare for the unexpected. I have a personal story I'll share about this week when I get to that one. Okay. So interviewing in the virtual world, first practice, just find somebody to practice with. And I'm thankful that Mark and Walt offer the services that they do to help people practice getting ready. Practice on a video platform too. Find a trusted friend to help you and run through some things. Make sure that you know what platform you're going to be asked to use for a virtual interview. Ask the recruiter in advance, what platform do you use? Is it Zoom? Is it MS Teams? Is it WebEx? Is it something else? There are others out there as well. So don't just assume it's going to be Zoom, even though that seems to be a most popular one, because they do have some discrete differences, and you'll not want to look like you're struggling with trying to work through it. Open the program ahead of time and see how you look and just practice. Okay. Now let's look at the next topic. How do you operate it? There are many options, so get familiar with what it is you're going to be using. I do recommend you use your laptop or your desktop, not a phone or not an iPad or tablet type device, because the desktop and laptop allow you to easily share things if you have things on your device that you want to share. It also allows for things, you can adjust things a little bit better. I've actually seen people using things like iPads or tablets, and they're moving around and they're doing all kinds of stuff. Well, guess what? If I'm on the other end of that, that's distracting to me as well. So have that still platform so that you can move your head and kind of move around a little bit, but your device is not moving. Test the video and audio up front. I do that every time before I join, even if I'm doing 8 meetings a day, which is what I've been doing the last month. 8 meetings a day with 8 different clients. I always go in and say, test my video and my audio to make sure that, they can hear my voice playback before they come on. That's just important because things can go wrong. Do a test run with a trusted friend. That is so important. Ask somebody to help you out. Somebody surely owes you a favor, right? Think about what you look like on screen, and your attention to detail is very important. Think about the angle of the camera looking at you. I mean, people sometimes they're on and they do stuff like this. Well, where's Gayle? Where did she go? Oh, she's at the bottom of the screen. I can see that little ceiling fan at the top of her ceiling, right? Well, that's not what you want the focus to be on. And you also don't want the screen looking up underneath your chin. That's not as flattering as having it looking down at you. One of the things that I do is I actually use a stack of books. So I've actually stacked up about 10 inches tall, a stack of books, and I set my little MacBook Pro on top of it. And so then I can angle it so it's looking down at me instead of up at me. So I can kind of control what's in the background as well. Make sure you've got lighting. I have a lamp sitting in front of me that I turn on in different times of the day. And if it's sunny out, today it's cloudy. But on a sunshiny day, it's like I may only need the lower level of the lamp, but then I may need a brighter light if it's evening or if it's darker. So I do that so that my face shows. Sometimes I've met with people and it's so dark that I can't even see their face, like they're blending into the background, or it's like they're wanting to hide. So make sure that you break out, break through that clutter and make sure they can see you. Okay. Also, fully dress if you're doing a virtual interview. And when I say fully dress, make sure that, like if you've got a blazer that you wear, ladies or guys, whatever, wear that blazer. Put your jewelry on if you wear jewelry, earrings and necklaces. Wear your shoes. It's so funny. People think about that. And I have clients that they shared with me this week. In fact, they're like, oh, I decided to be casual today. And one lady had her hair up in a bun and kind of pulled up like she had just been working out. Now, I wasn't interviewing her. It was a career coaching discussion, but we talked about that. It's like, okay, now make sure that you don't look that way when you're dealing with people at work, because part of how you look and come across is your brand. But, she had on her house slippers. It's like, okay, think about that. It's like if you dress for the interview, like you'd be seeing them in person, you wear your shoes too. And so you feel like you're confident because you know how you're appearing to yourself. And if you were in person, you'd be looking that way too. So it really does make a difference in how you come across. So make sure that you're paying attention to those little details too. Okay, now what do you look like on screen? There's something else besides what you look like. What does your background say about you? And you guys may be looking at my background and saying, that's a pretty boring room. Well, I have pictures of my grandkids on the other 3 walls in my office. I have pictures of things they've drawn and colored that I framed. So, and I've got books on my bookshelves. So if you looked at the other parts of my room, if that was my background, you'd say, oh, what a clutterbug she is. But I use the closet behind me, which is my office closet in my home office. I use that as my solid background. So I don't have things to distract when I'm meeting with personal clients that I'm working with. I don't want to distract based on pictures I have of my grandkids. They don't want to see that stuff. And if you're interviewing with someone, you want them to be focused on you and not be looking, what do they have in the background? You don't want that to distract your attention. So think about those things as well. What does your background noise say about you? My background noise, except for my horrid voice today with my allergies and all, you don't hear my dogs barking in the background. At least you shouldn't, because my husband promised he was going to keep them in their crates until I'm done with this workshop so that you wouldn't hear them barking outside my window like they usually like to do. They'll come up and look in and see me and they'll start barking. And so you want to think about the background noise. Make sure that you don't have things that you can control going on. Don't run your dishwasher or your washing machine or dryer. Don't have those things going while you're in the interview on video. Because if those things start beeping in the background, I know my dishwasher keeps going off until I fix it, open it up and make it quit beeping. So that distracts me, and I don't want to have to get up and do something like that either during an interview. And then, believe it or not, avoiding uninvited guests from attending your interview. That can be both pets or people. We've actually had situations where I've been working with clients, not even in an interview, and somebody in their home, your husband or wife, walks behind them. And it's like, fortunately, they had clothes on. That sometimes, think about that. Those kind of things can happen. And so even though you do your best to say, hey, I'm in an interview, don't bother me. Well, I'm lucky I have a private home office. I close my door so that my husband knows if that door is closed, I'm working and nobody comes in, the dogs don't come in and so on. But think about those things because you want to keep uninvited things from happening as well. That's real important. And again, if you don't have a private office and you're sitting in your dining room, for instance, make sure that you look and see what does your background look like? What kind of an impression are you making? And make sure that you don't have those other interruptions going on as much as possible. Okay. And then one more thing. Please remember that when you're on screen, it does feel strange because, again, I'm talking to my computer camera here. I can see some of you over here on the side, but it's like if I look at you, then I'm not looking at you, right? So I'm trying to focus on that little green dot that's my camera, but it's hard to because I want to look at the people over here on the side. So think about it though, you don't have to be stiff and you don't have to be like scared. You can still bring your personality with you when you interview on screen. If you can smile, that's great. How do you normally behave in person? I try to pretend that you guys are just on the other side of my desk for me in my office, and I'm just having a conversation. And that works really well when I'm doing one-on-one meetings with clients because I pretend that they're sitting across from me. Makes it a lot easier. So you can be more conversational about it. But your body language still matters, okay? And we've got one more tip here. This is the one I was going to share about that happened to me this week too. When you go into an interview, a couple of unexpected things might happen that you cannot plan for. First of all, what if you have a power outage? Uh-oh, what happens? If you have a power outage, what happens to your internet connection? Does it also go out? Maybe. Okay, mine does. If my power goes out, my internet doesn't work. Okay, how do you prepare for the unexpected? See, I have my little phone here. Have my little phone. It's a different provider than my internet provider, which is probably a good thing. So Monday morning, I woke up early and turned my computer on because I was getting ready for 8 client meetings back to back all day on Zoom. And at 6 a.m., I'm looking at this going, oh no, my internet is out. My power was on, but my internet wasn't working. Oh, and that happens more often than I would like anymore with the provider I have. They just have challenges. And today was, Monday was one of those days. So what did I do? Oh, I used to have a hotspot on my phone, but I got a new phone recently and a different phone plan. And guess what? I didn't have my hotspot that I normally had. That's one of the things that's important. And if your internet provider is out, do you have a hotspot on your phone that you can use? So I called my phone provider, and within 30 minutes, they had added a hotspot. I had my phone operating. I was up and running 15 minutes before I had my first appointment. But it was because I had my hotspot on my phone to connect to my computer so I could do my Zoom meetings with my clients online. Same thing goes for interviews. So let's pretend that your power goes out and your internet goes out. Well, I always make sure at night before I go to bed that my laptop is fully charged. So if my power's out, I still have a fully charged laptop that'll probably get me through the whole day of meetings. And I make sure my phone's charged up so that when I wake up in the morning, my phone's charged and I have a hotspot. And yes, I about freaked out Monday morning saying, oh my gosh, I used to have a hotspot. Now I don't. I got one now and I'm going to keep one, right? So, but think about things like that. That way you're prepared for the unexpected and you don't have to say, oh, I have to cancel the interview because my power's out, my internet's out, and so on. Okay. So think about that. And as a last resort, make sure again, you've got that direct phone number to the person that you're going to interview with, because even if you try to plan for everything, well, now it may not be a traffic dilemma trying to get to the place in person, but it could be that your power goes out or your internet goes out and you're going, oh, I tried everything and it fail safe didn't work. So you can call them and say, can we do this on the phone or can we reschedule because I have other complications? So we just don't want to make them think that we're silly and stupid, right? We want to make sure that we look all together, even though sometimes we're that duck that's paddling under the water as fast as we can go. So you ace the interview by going through all of the tips and the coaching that Mark and Walt can provide too. You've made the most of the interview. take your steps to stand out and ace that interview. And I do like to remind people, especially those who are believers in the Lord's word, remember Jeremiah 29:11. That's one of my favorites because it reminds me that the Lord has plans for me to prosper me and not to harm me. And so I like to remember that because he has a plan for my life. And I've seen very clearly when I look in the 2020 rear view mirror, and I can see why I was put in certain situations to land me where I'm at even now. I had to go through my own career transition in 2008 to discover what I really wanted to do and reinvent myself with the help of people like Jeff Morris and Foster Williams, who helped me make decisions that allowed me to see what I wanted to do. And that's why I get to do the things I'm doing today. So just remember those things, just run with it, prepare for things and run with it. Okay. Now it's question time. And this is where Jeff is going to get to take back over and ask questions.
Gayle, what is your take on virtual backgrounds on laptops?
Okay, I don't have a problem with virtual backgrounds on laptops, but what is distracting is sometimes people will use that virtual background, but then if you move around a little bit, you can see something else there. It looks fake. So I know that there are devices of products you can buy. I've had people tell me this, where there's like a little screen that you can install behind you, like on the chair behind you, that allows that backdrop to look like it's a real office, if you will. Some of them make it look like you're really in an office versus your home. So I think just be careful on what you pick there. The other thing is sometimes I have friends that do this. They'll do like, the Golden Gate Bridge, or they'll do like a beach in Hawaii, and it's a fake backdrop. And to me, for an interview, that's distracting as well. I'd rather see you in an office setting if it's not going to be your home, because everybody knows that we're operating from our home offices now. If they're not inviting you in, they know you're going to probably be at home. You're probably not going to be at a coffee shop even. You're going to be sitting at home somewhere. So just think about what that backdrop looks. Again, how does it present you? Because you're the one that wants to come across. You don't want other distractions working in.
So I guess
Oh.
French fries don't work, or how
Yeah.
about this one, or mixed food. This is
See?
always a favorite of mine. I like this one a lot.
But now where are you interviewing, Jeff? If you're interviewing at a food company for a role in food, that could be fun, right?
Okay.
But yeah,
Right.
those French fries, I'm like, oh no, that makes me hungry.
All right, that is Gayle's presentation. If you have any questions, you're welcome. I didn't see anything in the chat window, but if you have any questions, you're welcome to unmute your mic, ask away. Walt's with us, Ron's with us. Any questions, comments?
I have a question.
Yes.
So I bought the backdrop, of course. I actually have a backdrop for my Garden of the Gods. I'm in Colorado Springs. And that I find that actually is a great icebreaker to kind of get everybody at ease and familiarity when you talk. Obviously, I interview in Colorado, so we all have our own favorite mountain spots. Is that a problem?
Can you show it?
What did you say, Ron?
Can she show it?
Can you show it to us?
There. See, that's about 10 minutes from my house.
Well, I was up there this past summer and it's beautiful.
Yeah, yeah, no, but you see, when I talk to a lot of people in Colorado, everybody has their own spot. And so so the conversation for about first 5-10 minutes is really favorite mountain spots. So
I think what you've done is you've broken the ice. And I think by breaking the ice in many circumstances before an interview is a good thing. How do you break the ice? How do you, form that common bond? How do you associate with something? So, if it's working, great. I think that's if you feel like it's working, keep doing it. Walt, any comments?
I ask others, what do they think about your background, get different opinions. I'll just give you a different one, just to be different. It could be distracting. I could be looking at your background and not paying attention to you. I mean, the first thing I did when you said Garden of the Gods is your background, I said, why did you choose Pikes Peak? I mean, it's right there.
It's
But
all,
anyway.
well, the mountain and all the pictures, all the pretty pictures are copyrighted, so I didn't, that's my picture.
Well, I'm just joking around, but what I'm saying is, it could be distracting. And if you're looking at an initial impression, my initial impression is going to be more about your background than it is about you.
I
Because
see.
I'm going to really notice that. And so now, does it really make all that difference? Is it going to hurt you or whatever it might be? I wouldn't say that, it's going to be a definite killer. But I'm one that tries to stay what I call center of the circle, stay out of trouble. Don't do things that might be risky. Why take the chance or that sort of thing? So I kind of go that route, saying how can I stay out of trouble? So I'm fairly conservative on my actual opinions on how I think we should do things.
I think
Jan, I'm going to literally echo what Walt said. I go on the conservative side. I think a lot of people probably would recognize that. But also, I think there is a possibility it could be distracting. And so the question becomes is, do you want to take that possibility? I'm not saying don't, I'm just weigh the pros and cons.
Well, I use it for my board meetings and everybody loves it, and then I can't figure out how to change it to the other one. And that's where I run into trouble.
Well, changing it to the other thing isn't hard. All you have to do is go to the little up arrow next to where it says video.
Uh-huh.
And then you can select a different background.
Gotcha.
Now, what I will say about your background is, to me, it's not as distracting as other backgrounds. You'll see other backgrounds that have books in the background or have lots of photos. That's when I tend to focus on, well, what is in the background, and what is out, what's out there. So at least your shot is not, to me, it's not as distracting. I've seen many others that have like a full library behind somebody or.
Well, that's one of the reasons I had to come up with that, is because what's in the back of me in my office is not attractive.
Right.
And,
Well,
and very distractive.
And now Zoom has changed things where you can actually just have a fuzzy background. So, I can go and change my background to, let's see here.
Yeah, I like those palm trees.
You can
Yeah,
just
do
have that
not do this one.
background. It does, people don't really know what's back there. So, quite
Right.
frankly, I think this is a nice one. I think this is a nice.
So Jan, I'm giving you an example of one not to do. Do not do.
Oh,
either
no,
of
no,
those.
I'm immediately thinking about my vacation. So yeah,
There
you're
you
right.
go.
Yeah,
Oh, look
I
at
mean-
that snow. Snow is cute. Of course, it's right now snowing outside. So yeah, that's I could just put the picture window outside.
Right. So, lots of options. You just have to be careful. With board meetings and stuff, I don't think it makes a big difference. But if you're interviewing for a job, you don't want them to think about anything else except you. You want them to
Okay.
concentrate on you.
Thank you, guys.
What else can we answer for somebody? Anything else? Walt, you want to tell us a little bit about the interview success workshop?
Happy to. You can prepare all you want, but your computer has a mind of its own. And I cannot understand why, when I was trying to open Outlook so that I could get the Zoom from Jeff's email, it wouldn't open. So when I restarted, it says it couldn't restart because Outlook was open. And so I'm not sure what was going on in my life. But all right, let me tell you about the workshop. I focus on one specific part of interviewing. There's tons of things. I think Gayle has a great presentation, nice overall view, lots of factors. Almost everything she says is golden in there about things. I focus on the selling aspect of our interview. And so I have a free interview success workshop that focuses on how do we sell what they're buying. So in 1999, after I was downsized and I really flunked an interview, I sat down and said, what is it? What's going on here? And I developed a model of three legs on the stool: the I am, I do, I help, who we are, what we do, and how we help. So companies are looking at me as a candidate and saying, who are you? What's your personality like? What are your characteristics? What do you do? What is your knowledge? What are your hard skills? Right? And so, yeah, it looks like you can do the job. And, once you get to the interview, you almost already passed the I do part. That's one of the easier parts to determine without looking and talking to somebody. Look at a resume, look at LinkedIn. So it looks like you've done those kinds of things. Then there's the I help, which is rarely seen in an interview. I'm not sure why that is, but that's one of the things that I focused on and saying, well, we talk about what we do, we talk a little bit about who we are, but we don't talk very much about the value we bring, which is the real reason they're hiring us. They don't hire us just to do things. They hire us to have results with those things. So how do we do that in an interview? So I picked these 12 basic categories of questions. It's very informal. It's a learning interview. It's not a mock interview. It is on Zoom. You have to be registered to attend. Look me up on LinkedIn under All Glass, and you can see some information about it. But it is an informal time. I like to have a little fun together. There's no need to have to go through stress while we're learning how to improve our interviewing skills. And so I call it learning without scorning.
Walt, thank you very, very much. All right, hold your eyes here for just a second. All right, Career at FW, Career USA, we're putting on training 4 days a week. Please come join us tomorrow, being the third Thursday of the month. We're going to talk all about effective resumes. We'll share some best practices for resumes, primarily resumes driven to the ATS system, the applicant tracking system. And then if anybody would like to share a current draft of their resume, you're welcome to do so. Just take the header information off, your name, phone number, email address, take that off. But if you'd like to share the rest of it, we'll be glad to take a look at it and offer some feedback. This Friday at the North Dallas Plano Career Focus Group, the group is now meeting in person. So if you live here in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, please come join us in person. For those who are out of town, please join us on Zoom or Facebook. We're going to be talking about branding, personal branding. This is a two-part seminar. We'll have part one this Friday, part two will be next Friday. And I always think it's a good way to kick off the year to, what is your brand? What are you telling people you are? Next Tuesday for LinkedIn Tuesdays, Ruth Lipsky will be with us to talk about how to drive recruiters to your LinkedIn profile. And then next Wednesday, for Interviewing Wednesdays, Mark McDonald will be here to talk about the Confident Candidate Lessons from the Pit Crew. So come join us for that next Wednesday. This session has been recorded. It will be on the Career DFW Facebook page and the Career USA YouTube channel. On the Career USA YouTube channel, one of the things you'll find is all 13 parts of our workshop. We will repeat this starting in the middle of February, towards the end of February, but there's 13 lessons here. The first 5 lessons all talk about what do you do before the interview, how to prepare for the interview, how to analyze a job description, how to make sure you have your star stories ready to go. The second 5 lessons, lessons 6 through 10, are all about what do you do during the interview, how you handle openings and closings and showing enthusiasm, and how do you build rapport with the interviewer. And then the last 3 topics are just some advanced topics, just some summary to sort of go over things that we've talked about prior. So on the Career USA YouTube channel, be sure to click on playlist because we have over 420 videos up there right now. Pick the topic, pick the playlist that you want. Down below, you see that red arrow, click view full playlist, and up will come a list of all the different dates and topics, and you can go back and scroll back and watch any of them that you would like. If you're not receiving emails about our workshops, please join the Career USA mailing list. Just send an email to Career USA, the + subscribe at groups.io. You'll never be spammed, but what you will get is the topic of the day, the title of the topic of the day, and most importantly, the Zoom link of the day. That way you can open your email, open the Zoom link, click on the Zoom link, and join us for our session. Please note, Career DFW, we're a 501c3 nonprofit organization. All of our speakers are volunteers. Ron's a volunteer, Walt's a volunteer, I'm a volunteer. Everything I've done over the last 14 years has just been to help you land your next great opportunity. So please consider making a donation so we can continue on to provide the services that we're providing. So thank you very much for joining us today, everybody. And hopefully we'll see you tomorrow.